Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this live. I'm Kusal Matthew of Koos, and this is Becky Lee. Becky, who are you?
Hello, everybody. I am Becky Lee, Becky Lee Soul Alchemy. I run a number, well, I don't run, I've created a number of large communities for people to connect. I I don't believe in titles. It's always like through my journey, it's been hard to do a title for myself because I don't know what to put it because it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. So I'm just Becky Lee. That's my brand. That's who I am, and that's how I present myself.
I like it, Becky. Honestly, like you and I kind of met that random way, anyways. I mean, I feel like you and I found you on one of your community pages on Facebook, and we randomly just started talking, and then over time, it just it became a little more natural, and and here we are. So honestly, I love your community. I think, a lot of the page that you have, especially because I know your Facebook a little bit more, at least on the community side. And I like it because you have a huge variety of contributors. You have a lot of different things. And like, I'm a very logical person. And today's topic is intuition. But intuition is very feeling and it's also removed of logic and feeling. So I'm glad that you and I get to kind of talk about that, and
I love that because intuition, it's funny, when I started my whole journey of opening my eyes and seeing the bigger perspective, intuition was one of those things I never trusted my whole life. So I never knew what it was. I
yeah.
never understood. Like I was run by ego, by trauma, by all those scary voices in my head. And when I learned that intuition is actually that soft voice, that knowing, and it can be logical, but it's just like, no, but it's loving, it's not afraid. It's just like that knowing.
Yeah, I think what you said there really kind of got me, where you were just kind of like, it's knowing, it's kind of like that void, and I think I'm just like you, I feel like I had a situation where my intuition was blocked, like I had that feeling of like, and I never wanted to believe it was ego, but as I look at it now, it was the trauma and the issues that happened. I was always in like that state of fight or flight. And that to me was my ego. It was like that self survival overrid everything else. And even though I would have never said that's ego, I realized that's probably my ego that was blocked or
And
blocking me.
what that is like when we see that, it's our mind and our body is there to protect us. And if we've been through traumatizing experiences and you have that embedded in your nervous system, and then you go through something that triggers that same feeling and it may not be real, it may be perceived, it starts that whole alarm system in your body where it's like, get out, get out, get out now, like the fear, the flight. And when we're in that like heightened arousal state, we honestly cannot tune into our true intuition until we sort of clear that away. We peel off the layers of the onion and we just sit quiet with ourselves and get to know what that is. I like to compare it to working out. If you go to the gym once and you do some weights, you're not going to have the muscles that you want. It's like your intuition. You have to work with it and trust it and almost tell yourself you trust it. Feel
Yeah.
into it. But we'll get into that in the podcast today, just ways to discern the difference. Before we do that, I just want to welcome everybody who's watching today. Thank you for being here. This is, our first chat together, and it's super awesome and it's super inspiring how we meet people. It's intuition, how we meet people online randomly. It's like soul family coming together, and it's like, hey, let's do this. This feels right. Let's
Yeah.
do this. So, if you're watching this today and you find some knowledge in it and wisdom and help, please share it out. Help share it out to the masses. That's what we're here for. We're here to serve you and assist you in your journey.
I love that. And honestly, yeah, I think that's a good segue into really like what intuition is. And before I ask you, one thing I want to say is if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to put that in the comment section. Also, check out Becky. A lot of her links is also in the links below. So check out the Facebook page. I think healing and growing, and I think to yourself, you said soul family. I think as I've been going on my own spiritual journey, because most people see me as this logical, this like, and I've been trying, even though I'm emotional and like like I care about people, but like I try to block my emotions as much as I can. So my intuition doesn't flow without it. And I think connecting and making those connections, Becky, have been, oh my God, it's been a godsend. I feel like every random person that felt the same way was so validating. And that kind of allowed me to believe and understand intuition more. And I think for people, like you said, who don't follow their intuition, who don't understand what it is, they shut it down because they've only done it once. They've only done it, like you said, in those moments where it really only mattered. And I think it's powerful. My cousin said the same thing about mindfulness. Like because I'm from Sri Lanka, which you and I are still learning a lot about each other, and I'm that's where I'm originally from, and Buddhism got a lot of its starts in India and um, in in Sri Lanka. But realistically, mindfulness is another thing, just like intuition. You have to learn how to be present. You have to learn how to listen.
You do, and you have to learn how to tune in, and I see somebody tuning in got upset at the crickets in the background, and that's just if that bothers you, we're sorry. We're all about being here in the now, and I actually think the crickets are a beautiful sound because it's like a rhythmic, beautiful sound. But yeah, tuning into your intuition is like so important. And I think a lot of people think, and they use that word empath, and they think that being super highly emotional is your intuition. It's not. That too blocks that knowing, and it blocks that because you're in that heightened state of emotion and you cannot make these informed decisions when you are in that heightened state of emotion or you're triggered. These buzzwords that we like to use are triggered, empath, awake, these words. And like I said, I don't like to use labels on things, so I'll try to use different verbiage to explain them instead of those buzzwords that are out there right now. But yeah, when we're in this heightened state, whether it's being super emotional in a fight with our spouse, angry at our kids, upset at our boss, upset at ourselves, we are going to make decisions based on past experiences. So, quote unquote ego. And ego gets a really bad rap. Ego is actually very important. Our ego is so important. We need to balance the two.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And that's funny because I didn't read it until you saw it. Because Jacob, thank you for commenting. Because I thought it was you're talking about cricket, like in cricket from that we play in. You're right. That's actually my fault. I'm here in Florida, and like it is that time where it is in there. But to your point, Becky, I think for me, I would always focus on random things that would then block me from feeling everything else. And I wasn't able to listen to even what my intuition was, is because I was so focused on, in this case, crickets, and that would then just, that would be my focus. And I couldn't focus on anything else. And, I think people in perspective, and I think if you're focusing on the negative, you're focusing on those things that happen, it's hard to understand. And like in one of my first videos, I talk about like, and this is probably going off the taboo, but like even like BDSM, like that stuff is like trauma related, but realistically it's not, because it's perspective. Because some people
Yeah.
think, oh, but some people think this is amazing, but it's all perspective. And if you allow your mind to focus on anything, that's what grows.
Well, and it's cool because our mind, I think of our mind, I'm very analytical as well. I'm a chemical engineer technologist by trade. So I'm trained to be scientific and engineering at the same time. So I want the best solution to solve the problem the quickest way possible. I'm all about efficiencies and creating efficiencies with anything that we do. And our mind is an algorithm. Our body, our energy is an algorithm. What you're seeing outside of you, anybody watching, is a direct reflection for something going on within you. So if you don't like what you see, change your mindset. Check your thoughts. Check the computer system running behind the system, that operating system. Where are your thoughts going? Are you driving down the street and somebody cuts you off and you're like, blah, 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 what the F, blah, blah, blah. Or a song comes on the radio and you're super judgmental. We all do it. Even I do it. And then I'm like, okay, no, somebody likes this song. That's why it's on the radio. I can't judge. My song's not playing on the radio. Somebody likes this. Oh my gosh, somebody cut me off. Well, maybe they're having a bad day. Send them love. And the more you do that, and the more you send everything around you love, especially when you feel malice towards it or judgment, the more you'll find you can tune into your heart space. And the more the intuition and the synchronicities, the flow, everything will come to you. You become a magnet for it. Your
Yeah.
heart, when you open your heart up, it is a magnet. Our Taurus field is formed from our heart. And this is scientific knowledge. Our Taurus field is a magnetic resonance that our body sends out, our energy sends out. People think it's the mind, it's the heart paired with the mind. And your heart gives off so much energy. And this is why you will pull in more intuitive pings, more higher energy because you're tuned into that energy.
I did not know that. Honestly, the Taurus, you said aura or
It's called the Taurus field. So if you go research this after, it's Taurus. Anybody who wants to research this, it's actually, excuse me, I'm getting sick. My throat is all, I think it's from
uh,
traveling. But your heart creates a magnetic field. So
hmm,
if you think of what a magnet does, it sends out these fields like the positive and negative poles, and your heart will create that. And the more you're tuned into your heart and your heart is open, and you work on your heart center, you send these energies out. And this is what I always think of. It's like you and I connecting. My Taurus field connected with your Taurus field, and it pulls people together. It actually magnetically attracts people, places, and circumstances to assist you, whether they may be good or perceived not good. It's all perception, like you said, but
wow.
it's to guide us down our path. It's like, have you overcome this roadblock in your past and you're going to make a different choice this time? Or are you going to go down that same path and have to learn the hard way again?
I like that. It's kind of like what they say, like change your frequency, change your path. But in this case, it sounds like it's like change your frequency, your mind, but change your Taurus.
Well, it
What?
all connects, right? Like you think about the chakra system. Your heart chakra is one of the strongest chakras, right? That paired with your solar plexus. Those two are that's what pulls in that belief in self in the heart. But this can be for another chat. We'll talk about chakras and how they work. Let's get back to intuition. But this
Yeah,
all pairs with the intuition because when you open that, it draws the messages to you, the knowings,
I
the
love. So let's get back to why we're here. Intuition. So Becky, for you, could you describe what intuition is?
So intuition is the quiet voice in your head. We're so used to that loud voice yelling at us, telling us what to do, the judgmental voice, the mean voice. Intuition is the kind, loving voice. Like think of the voice of somebody who's kind and loving in your life, like your grandma, somebody's nana or grandma, who's just like, "Oh, I love you. You go this way. This is the best for you." That's your intuition. And when we have that ego yelling at us all the time, it's very tough to hear the intuition because our body wants to go with the noise. The intuition never judges. The intuition is never scary. Even in a life and death situation, it's just that knowing to go. You're not sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scared. What do I do?" Your intuition's like, "Go now." And
Okay.
I'm sure we've all been in circumstances like that where it's like scary and you just know and you go.
Hmm. So you said it was the quiet voice. It was the quiet, like almost like the knowing. Like it's not judgmental, it's not shameful, but it's a part of you that just is able to understand. I mean, is that kind of what I heard you say?
It's accepting, it's that self-acceptance, it's that understanding. Whether you've made a poor decision that's led you up to the voice talking to you, it's saying, "I love you still, but you need to go here." Or, "I
Hmm.
love you still. This is who you need to talk to. You need to make a left turn here today instead of a right turn." And it leads you, down this road of synchronicities where you meet somebody that day by happenstance, or you have a conversation at Starbucks with some random person because you went to a different Starbucks today. It leads you where you're supposed to go.
I like that. I like that. And it's funny because I think the way I've learned it was in a similar way, but it took me in a different way to come to the same conclusion, And I read it in this book. It's called like Mind Body Connection. It's like a trauma book. It's about reintegrating the stuck pain and the stuck feelings and learning how to connect those. And it kept talking about a watchtower. And I kept thinking about like Lord of the Rings, like Sauron, he's just focused on, whatever it was. But I realized that because I've heard about it in Buddhism too, where it's like when you're quiet, you're able to listen and you're able to see the patterns and you're able to differentiate the thought and the feeling from yourself. It's like the part of you that exists apart from the rest of you. But to your point, it's also the same part that not always in fight or flight, but in random situations, it was like my guiding force. It was what saved me. And I think I, you know, I have always had a tough time believing in it. And I feel like a lot of people probably do too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think it's woo-woo, like when you have parents telling you to go one way, you need to go to this university, and you've grown up your whole life with dogma, different dogma around you, societal dogma, some people religious dogma, family dogma. You have to do this because this is what your family does. We lose that connection with it. And I love that light tower because it's like it's think of like your crown chakra and like your soul star chakra. It's connected to that. So it is like a watchtower tuning you into these higher realms of consciousness, this life force energy that everybody is able to tune into. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't tune into it, everybody watching. We're all attuned to it. We've just forgotten because we have these layers of perceived notions of who we should be, and we forget who we are. And honestly, it's about coming back to self. That watchtower, that's guiding us home, that light that's shining and honing us in, and that's beautiful. I love that analogy that book uses.
Yeah, but I think what you said made me realize something that I learned from one of my uncles. And he kind of left the family and he's going to try to be a monk, but he doesn't want to fully commit, and and this is in Sri Lanka, and he explained that when you are thinking, you're not listening. If you're thinking, you're not feeling. If you're listening, you're not thinking. And so whatever you give that mind's focus to is what consumes everything else, and it's not able to pick up on everything else. So if you believe that you're focused on just your eyes, you miss out on all the other senses. So it's that, to your point, it's that calm. It's learning how to differentiate between the survival mechanism and then that other part of you that just wants to exist.
It's very true. Sorry, I was just sharing this to my Facebook group so we can get it out there because this is such an important conversation. So many people just live to exist, and you're so right there. And we're raised to not be fully present, not to listen, but we're always listening to give a response instead of listening to just allow people to speak their truth. And honestly, that's why I started the communities that I did, because we need connection in a way that's not dogmatic, that everybody can accept everybody's belief is true to them because it is true to them. And we can be different, but still love and still live on this earth plane and be peaceful and be open-minded. And intuition tells you that. Like it's all coming from we all come from the same source. We're
Yeah.
all made of the same stardust. We're all made of the same neutrino streams. Like it's and when we can just like your uncle, that's so beautiful. When we live just to exist, we're wasting our time here on this planet. Like I tell people all the time, you don't understand how many souls you touch when you just smile at people in public. Think of the time when we're having a horrible day and somebody just smiles at you or they give you a compliment and you're like, "Oh my gosh," you almost feel undeserving of it. But
Yeah.
this is what we need to do to lift each other up on this earth plane.
You're right. And, it's, I read in another book, that back in the day, we used to have for every child 4 adults. Like, we literally were built to be in a community. Like, and I think that connection and I think the more we move away from it, that's where we lose some of that connection, that community. And, Jason, you on the other side. So thank you for your comment. I think that's sweet that you can resonate. And that's where, what I realize is like, even though I am this oxymoron of a person in my own life, no matter what, to Becky's point, we are stardust. We have that connection and realizing that there's more that we feel and that we think and that, and how we can let go of that ego and that like that things that we just tell ourselves or other people have told us just makes things so much easier to connect.
And this is how we heal, like, Jason making that comment saying he's feeling the emotional energy, that's your heart opening. That is your ego dropping and coming into the now and being like, "Man, I love myself." And you know what? I grew up my whole life trying to be somebody I wasn't, to please everybody around me, and it took me I almost died from it. Like, I had this battle within me, and I am now who I am because of that, and as soon as I used people used to be really, like, fight me on everything, but as soon as I started accepting who I was and knowing that I'm awesome, not in an egotistical way, but knowing I have a gift to
Yeah, of
share and a
course.
voice, all those visions of myself as a child that people are like, "Oh, you're silly. That's never gonna happen. Why would you wanna do that and speak in front of people? Why would you wanna you're not a good enough musician." That has all fallen away, and everything has just sort of come full circle, and everything just happens now. But we have to open to receive it, and this is part of intuition too. You can have all the pings and the intuitive messages come to you when you're in the shower, when you're meditating, but if you don't open to receive them and drop your ego enough to allow these strange circumstances to come in and understand that nothing is circumstance, it's all what you draw in, and trusting that and
Yeah.
going with it. It's like, wow, wow. Like, you will have your mind blown. Like, even just seeing synchronistic numbers, like looking at your clock, and every time you look at it, it's like 11:11 or 3:33, and it's like, oh, geez, something's trying to give me a message here.
Yeah. And but I feel like we're always just so stuck in the rat race, the, the drama, and and to your point, I think what one thing you said is people need to start working on it, and just building this. It's almost like a skill. It's learning how to differentiate yourself from yourself.
Yes.
you know, so how and I think we both had our own blocks with our own stuff. So how would you give advice to like your older self? Like how would you listen to yourself without listening to the other part of yourself?
So for me, the big part of like finding myself within myself was taking labels away. I'm not my job. I'm not how much money I make. I'm not what I wear. I'm not the car I drive. That shit doesn't matter. Excuse my language. Honestly, it doesn't. Some of the richest people I know are the most common folk people. Like, you'd never know they had any financial abundance. And then when you take those things away and peel those layers back, cry those tears of the little child in you who was denied the things that you wanted. Whether, I had a really great conversation with a lady when I was in Mexico talking about how her childhood was not quote unquote traumatic, but the stuff that happened to her still scarred her. But she denied that part of her because she
Yeah.
had friends who had been, abused or whatever. And I'm like, you can't do that because there's still parts of you that need that love and that healing.
I think that's very powerful, Becky. I think a lot of people trivialize some of the pain and or the things that have happened and they avoid things. I think you're so right with that, and I think is learning how to almost run towards the pain sometimes and not be so afraid of it.
And we gotta run towards fear. It's like your next timeline is going through fear. Your next timeline, like, when I say timelines, I mean that next state in your life, that next step up you take in energetically, business-wise, whatever you desire, is taking that head on, and the most difficult conversations, whether it's with ourselves or other people, take us there. Going through that fear, that shame that we hold within ourselves, that guilt that we might hold within ourselves, that self-hatred. Stop. I had this lady come up to me. This would have been like in 2017. I was at the bar. I loved to drink then and run away from my problems. And I was so drunk with my girlfriends. And I walked in, and this lady waves my girlfriend over. And I'm like sort of awkward with people in real life, like in public. I'm like, I don't want to talk to strangers. Like, but my friend was so gregarious. She's like, Becky, come over. And this lady's like, I saw you walk in. And I was like, are you hitting on me, lady? Like, what is going on here? And I was just like laughing. And she's like, you had so many angels around you. I've never seen that. She's like, by the way, I'm an old Irish witch, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Okay, I don't know what's going on because this is before I really understood things like this.
Yeah.
And she just said to me, she's like, "Get the F out of your own way. You're destined for greatness, but you're the only person stopping yourself because 'cause you're stubborn and you're self-sabotaging." And I was like,
Woo! I got chills.
"Whew."
Yeah. And that journey of letting go and believing, does it happen like that? Because I'll give you my experience, but I won't because I want to hear yours. Does it happen like that?
No, because it took me years after that to, like, actually start believing in myself and getting through that self-sabotage. I would choose relationships that were different, whether friendships or like, romantic relationships. I would always think my boss was mad at me at work, so I would manifest that. I would be getting in trouble. And until I started to learn that it was because my cognitive abilities were so low because of all the trauma I was holding on to in my nervous system, I was holding on to it like a warm blanket because it was comforting. That
Comfortable.
stress was comfortable to me. That living in constant fight or flight was comfortable because that's all I knew. It's all my body knew.
Yeah. That I think we could probably do a whole, you know, days or years talking about. But that's so true about, like we recreate, so one thing I read in another book when I was going through one of my many traumas and healing, and the unconscious mind creates the reality in which it thinks it deserves. And that stuck with me. It's because I kept believing that the trauma defined me. I kept believing that someone else's view of me is what I need to believe. And I kept giving my power away, to your point. And I think, for people, you know, to learn how to manifest your intuition, the one thing that I would say is you don't have to take years like it took me, or maybe even decades, and I don't know how long, you said it took you some time too, but like for them, I think that self efficacy, the belief, but also the experience. I think that's probably what you started doing. That's what I've been doing this last year is every day I'm like, what is something new that I can do tomorrow? And tomorrow. And then I kept just leveling up with experience. And the things that I thought were hard or that took me a year, it would happen within weeks or months. So time was another thing. I realized that time was in my benefit, but I kept saying this had to happen, this had to happen, that had to happen for me to start. And I just had to just start.
Yes. And that's so powerful because we always want to start tomorrow or next week or change is hard because our body, like I said, it's like our nervous systems are used to what we do. It's like patterns. We're, and when we make that conscious choice to step through that fear or that pain, if you're going to work out, if you're trying to change the way your body is or you're trying to change your mind is, it's pain because you're reprogramming your neural network and you're creating new, like our brains are not as neurally plastic as when we're younger, in our 20s.
Yeah.
Like I'm 42, it takes a little bit more work to create new neural pathways. I used to give up because I was such a perfectionist in that way and I'd just be like, I can't do this. Because I get so frustrated with myself. And then I started saying, I can do this because I'd see my kids mirroring that back to me. And I'm like, nah, this is not happening because I'm teaching them these poor behaviors. They're never going to get anywhere. So I started turning that around and saying, I can do this, whether I believed it or not. But, and then I started to mirror in situations where I could, and I could see it through and I could create and I could learn. And it was like, wow.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right because I think the more you give your mind that energy and the focus, it kind of that becomes your reality, And I think Jason was mentioning something like that too with himself and how things have just been he thinks about something and it happens, and it's interesting that for me my panic attacks, I realized at some point were psychosomatic. And for someone who has dealt with anxiety, panic attacks, trauma, to say that panic attacks are like psychosomatic is, I would be angry if I said that 6 months ago or a year ago. But for me, what I realized is, to your point, is even if I didn't believe it, I had to just do it. And every
Yeah.
time I kept doing something that kept giving me new experiences, it allowed my intuition to be free. It's like when you have so much poison in in your system, you just can't be healthy because your body's spending all this time purging the poison. And once the poison was gone, I was able to just feel. And I think that's what, to me, what my intuition is. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
Not an emotion that's quick. It's not a thought that can sometimes be persistent or whatever a thought can be because it's another reaction, but it's a feeling. It's like this, it's at my core that I just can't shake, you
You
know?
feel it, and you do, like, the feeling is so true, just to I suffered with major anxiety my whole life as well, and depression. Well, it was from other things, but what they say is depression's from living in the past and anxiety is from living too far in the future. We need to learn to live in the now and unwire those that our nervous system's so wound up. It's like when we can't control what's going on in the future. Well, the only thing we can control is right now, our thoughts right
Yep.
now, and that will set us up for a better future. So, it's that knowing. And when we feel like intuition isn't just in the mind, it's like it's a physical feeling in the body. You can start practicing intuition, like, and leaning in by asking yourself yes and no questions, like even things that you know the answers to, and feel. Do you feel expansive in your heart, in your chest area? And is your stomach calm? Or do you feel like a contraction in your chest area, or like panic? Then you know
That-
it's like a no.
yeah, I think that's awesome. I think if it's kind of what I heard and what I felt was like, if it's a hell yes, go towards it. If it's a hell no, don't go towards it. But if it's a maybe, then you got some more work to do. And but here's the thing. I don't know about you. I didn't think I had a choice. I didn't know I could control my intuition. And that is the moment I realized I had control over my own intuition, my own these feelings. That's when my aha moment happened. Like, when was it for you? I mean, I know she mentioned something and then you started doing something, but you said when you even started that, there's a part of you that didn't quite believe it. You were working towards believing it. But when or what happened where it's like, yeah, I believe
So
it.
it was when I really started teaching it. I still wasn't like, I believed it, but it was still like sort of woo woo to me. And I actually, one of my first courses I ever taught was tapping into intuition and higher knowledge. It was learning how the basics of doing it. So I would use a pendulum because it's all energy. I would use muscle testing. So if anybody wants a great book on how our muscles and our bodies know yes or no, our muscles know yes or no, Dr. David R. Hawkins, The Power versus the Force. He's got so many books out there on this, and he studied this. He's a kinesiologist, and I think he's a psychologist. I think he's his doctorate in psychology. So I love doctors that go in and study more of like an energy force, but
Yeah.
that's when I really started to do it. And when I started to understand intuition, we can actually control our futures through our intuition and through our mind. This is where intuition pairs with manifestation,
Mhm.
because when we know something's going to happen and we let go, we set that intention and we let go of the how, so the control, and we're like, okay, I'm going to follow this intuitive ping today. I'm going to write this many lines of a book if I'm trying to write a book, or um trying to, like, for me, I here's a physical example. My whole life, music was like my life. I love music. Music's my soul. I've always said that. I've always played musical instruments. Never super theoretically good. Always had people tell me I wasn't good enough, but that was part of my soul's evolution.
It's probably
And
their
so,
you're probably great because they're envious of you.
well, and it was just silly. It was like my ex-husband and like my parents, and it's like I was never like put on a pedestal, which is fine. It's like I should never wanted to be, but you always want people to tell you you're really good. And so I sort of gave it up for a long time. And then I started playing guitar again. And then I met somebody in my life who was not a positive person, but he was like in the musical side of things. So I learned a lot about music and how the industry works. And then when COVID happened, I couldn't go to live shows anymore. That was like my favorite thing, concert. So I'm like, screw this, I'm starting a band. And I had no clue what I was doing. And so I started a band. My drummer left and told me I'll never find another drummer because they're impossible to find. Had a drummer within 3 weeks. Had so many drummers that wanted to play with me, and I'm like, And I tell them I'm not that good. I have a couple songs written, but I don't really know how to jam with people. And honestly, within a year, I set the intention. We had a band together, an amazing band. I have an amazing musical partner that I work with now. And whether other people come and go, it's always him and I. We are the band. And I was like, I'm going to play all these musical venues in Calgary. And I played them all within a year. And it's
Wow.
like, this is just following that intuition and just knowing. I
Yeah.
just knew that this was what I was supposed to do. And
And to your point, it was the side of you that didn't have the fear or the shame. And
yes, I let that go.
and so as you were going on your musical journey, it sounded like, even though you said from your initial thought to a year from achieving all your goals, I mean, realistically, initially, before your intuition allowed you to start, logically, how long did you tell yourself it's going to take? Probably.
I didn't tell myself. I was like, when my band like was fully formed, like I had my singer, my bassist, my drummer, my other guitarist. I was like, we're gonna play these within a few months. And then I also set the intention because my intuition told me to. I'm like, I'm not going to have to find shows. People are going to find us. And that's what started to happen. We were getting asked. I'm like, how do people even know who we are? We were getting asked to play shows. And I'm like, cool. This is the power of our intuition paired with that higher knowing of where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, Becky, I think that's great. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the best examples because that's really kind of how my intuition happened as well. It was a lot of people told me no. It was more professionally, and but I had one boss, my boss Fred. He was like, "No, you were meant for Kusal. Don't let these other people bring you down." And he's like, "You're meant for this." And I kept thinking this. And
Yeah,
my was still to this for everyone else. He's like, "No, bro, you need to, he was like a dad to me, but I needed someone to believe until I was able to believe. And I think, that's kind of where I started, even this journey, like all my various things. And, I'm a business tech lending type of person, but like, digital marketing and all this stuff is brand new to me. I didn't think this was going to be successful. And like, you know, last month I was like, I'm going to take a little bit of a gamble on myself. And look, I mean, within like 6 weeks, it went from 74 to 74,000, like, and that has,
that's amazing.
and that has been a process of learning, and it's been a lot of experience and failing. And I think, you said something when we first started talking is a lot of people kind of get either complacent or they feel like, they're safe enough where they don't need to then run towards the fear. And I read something where it talked about aging. And I think once we get too comfortable, that's when a lot of the aging starts to happen too. So the moment you start getting too comfortable is when your body's like it doesn't have that urge to create, to live. And
Yeah.
that's I've realized, which I know sounds weird, but like I believe it in my core, you know?
Well, comfort is like giving up. Honestly, comfort is giving up on yourself. And not to say that to anybody who's like wants to be comfortable, if that's your life path, I think that's great. And you know that. But for me, I always say if we're not expanding, and with expansion comes discomfort, as you know, when you as a woman, when you have a baby, you're expanding, it's uncomfortable. When you blow a balloon up, it's expanding. It's like that like discomfort. And there's always that discomfort. And if we're not expanding, we're dying. We're letting ourselves go. And, you know, everybody who's successful in life, they have two key facts. The first one is they followed their intuition. The second one is they believe in themselves no matter what anybody else told them. Whether you like people, big wigs out there, big business people, or, leaders, those are the two things they have in common, all of them.
Yeah. And I think, so if you and I were stuck in, as you kind of explained, your trauma history, not believing, not being, not put on a pedestal, but being, built up to for your wings to flourish. And you had to kind of do that yourself, you know? And, and so I think there's one thing that I truly believe in. It's the epigenetics of it, how our mind can activate these inert parts of ourselves. And, that's a topic that you and I both, when we first had this conversation about doing this, you mentioned it. And I was like, one of my first videos, I mentioned it. And I was like, we need to really go into that because, like, it really talks about how our thoughts can then change our physical body.
Yeah. There's a really good book on that too that I'll mention for anybody watching. It's by, I think her name's Anita Morjari. It's called Dying to Be Me. And she lived this life of dogma and self-hate. And she actually, I think at like in her 40s, was riddled with cancer. And she died. But then she had these visions, like, and I've had a near death experience, so I thought it was such a cool book to read and like read how somebody else wrote about it. And then she woke up and her belief had changed from these visions. And she's got doctor's accounts, like it's very documented. And she woke up and within a few days the cancer had left her body. She started gaining weight again and they kept her in the hospital because they were like, this can't be right. Like we were dead. Like
Yeah, yeah.
her body ate itself from the cancer and from the sickness. And she came back and it was gone. And she's like, the big thing that changed is I started to believe in me and I started to love me and see me.
Yeah, that's powerful. And one, I'm sorry that we nearly lost you because that'd be horrible. But it sounds like you were able to use that experience to change who you are and unlock who you're meant to be. And and I think that kind of goes back to that complacency. You always knew you were meant to be more, but you believed in a lot of what other people said is what I heard you say. And so it sounded like these, whether it was traumatic or not, maybe that intensity was the reason to start, but you made a choice. And it sounds like when you made that choice, just like that woman, she made a choice and she believed wholeheartedly, it started changing, and I think that's powerful, Becky. It really is. I tell myself I will now. I say I will,
Yes.
and then I don't stop at I will. I use a SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. But like I don't go like that businessy into it, but it's like I will do X by this time, and then I go into like I am statement. And so all the various chakras, like I understand wealth. I can speak money, and I try to then add those things. And so it just I have to believe in it so much where it it dominoes everything. It's like all the guilt goes away, and it takes me a couple days, but the moment I start doing it, it just my intuition and that feeling grows.
Because your body's like, yes, your intuition's like, yes, he's open to this. He's doing it. Like, I'm going to give you more messages and you're opening your heart to yourself and to those around you. It's like, I believe that all of us who serve in this way, we serve for the collective. It's not about us, it's about us sharing our stories. And I believe like the reason I went through what I went through, and you know what, I could compare it to other people's stories who are way worse, but this it was big for me and it almost, my life was pretty much over. And I remember being so happy and so free and seeing everything from a different perspective, and that you see you're not in your body, you see down. And my dad was there. My dad had crossed over and I never knew him, and he was there and I knew it was him, and he was like, It's not your time yet, you have to go back." And I just remember being like, "No, I'm ready to go. I don't want to do this life anymore." And he's like, "You have bigger purposes, get back
Yeah,
now."
I
And I
have,
was just like,
by that, I don't want to lump your experience into movies, but like Dumbledore and Harry in book 7. Even the new Guardians of Galaxies 3. Rocket goes and he passes away, and his friends are like, "No, it's not that time yet." And it's funny because you explain this in this whole like near life experience, but for me, I think for me, when I realized my intuition was kind of like it was less about my intuition and about like near death, but I realized that I will die at some point. And it was realizing what heaven or hell really meant. And I realized that like hell and heaven is a true thing. It's DMT is something that our body releases, but ultimately it controls time. Like if I drop something on my foot, how slowly does everything happen? Time is relative at that point. I can see it slow motion, the hot grease falling towards my foot. At some point, I realized that, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to relive my entire life, whether I'm a good person or a bad person, when I go to that next journey, when I reconnect with Source. And so, even though I wasn't a religious person, it made me realize that that's what it was. Even though it might not be this bigger than life thing, it really kind of is because it what brings us back to where we came from.
It does, you reconnect with that source, and that's what meditation helps us do. That's what doing things that make you happy. Like, I always tell my clients, like, "Are you not taking time out of your day to do something that makes you happy?" Whether it's listening to an audiobook, whether it's dancing for 5 minutes, doodling. Some people like doing Sudoku and math equations. Do you like deriving equations? Do it. If it makes you happy, when you're in that place of joy, that is heaven.
Yeah.
That is heaven. When you're in that place of hating yourself, fighting with your spouse, fighting with your family, that is hell. Like this is it's an earthbound thing. Like this is my belief on it just from what I've seen, and it's like we create our lives the way we want them to be, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And when
No,
we tune into our intuition and our heart, then we can more effectively consciously create our lives to a place that we want them to be.
I think you're absolutely right, Becky. I think it's creating the life that you're meant to be and not feeling guilty about that. And Jason, I saw your two last comments. One, Becky's information is down below in the links.
Ooh,
Uh,
let me answer the next question. I like that one.
okay.
So Jason's asking, as a diehard empath, how do you stop helping others and putting yourself first? I developed so much illness. So this is so important for anybody. An empath, honestly, is just somebody who's been super through a lot of traumatic experiences, and we learn as children to pick up on people's emotional cues, and we want to save them. So an empath, what I see it as, is somebody who's just codependent. Honestly, we're all sensitive to a point. So what you want to do is you can set firm and loving boundaries. And honestly, if you believe in yourself, if you know that you are worthy and worth it, and you want these relationships, you can manifest a change in the relationship with the person. Because as you shift your mindset and you heal and you shift yourself, the relationships around you will shift. And you may have to take a time out from the person for a while if they don't adhere, but start setting loving boundaries, whether it's with children, spouses, family, work people, any relationship. Start telling yourself that I am worthy. I am worthy of being respected. I am worthy of having my time. And it might sound really, really selfish. However, this is how you tune back into yourself and your heart center. Because when you're always serving everybody else, you can't fill from an empty cup, right? So you almost need to unplug from everything and be selfish for a little bit and really get to know your own energy and
I,
start filling yourself up.
Becky, that's amazing. Honestly, I think you pretty much said exactly how I felt because I think Jason, it's tough because all you want to do is help other people. You care, you value them, and you're a good person at the end of the day. But ultimately, I think to add on to what Becky said is it goes back into realizing that you're no good for anyone else if you're not in a healthy place. And I think for me, I'm still letting go of my codependency. I don't know how many relationships I've been where I put the other person above myself to the point where it is just painful. And I think realizing that self love comes from being able to love more. That one day of sleep, if someone hates me because I need to sleep, is that someone I need in my life? If someone is mad at me that I care about someone else over them, is that someone that is good for me? So I think it's taking a step back and stop reacting to people and the experiences and learning how to maybe intentionally respond. That is a hard thing when we've been in this cycle of people pleasing and codependency. Because my self worth is still low, but I've had to learn that for me to be the person I'm meant to be, I can't help everyone because ultimately no one's going to be there for me. And ultimately, if I fix it for them, they're never going to learn the lesson. And that's the hard part is we can teach someone and take them to the water, but we can't force someone to drink. And I think the more you believe in your worth based on if they're drinking or not, that's when we give our power away.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. So beautifully said, and I totally agree with every bit of that. It's like we have to sometimes just unplug. Like I think of us as like a light bulb. Sometimes you need to unplug and recharge and come back to understand like people ask me all the time, "How do you work with so many people all the time and not get burnt out?" It's because I'm like a conduit for source energy. I have attuned myself and not saying anything's better or anybody's better than anybody else. It's just been a lot of work of like calibrating my energy where I have these firm boundaries with my loved ones and but I love them and I'll serve them, but I serve myself first to be able to serve them.
Yeah, I agree with that, Becky. And and I think with that, I did a lot of personality testing, a lot of like spiritual, like human design, Myers Briggs, the pattern apps, like and learning about like my spirituality, like my ascended, my moon, like not a lot of people understand that, but for me, understanding that there's a cycle to life and that I'm just a cog in it, and there's a lot that is predetermined that I need to, if I just believe in it, then I can change the things I don't really help me.
Yeah, everything I believe in that. There's so much predetermined. However, there's so many different timelines that we can align ourselves with that are predetermined. So we can either stay maybe on the lower one and like follow that lifeline, or this is how I envision it, and I've had visions about it. Or you have all these different lifelines, all these different timelines where if you choose you and you choose to serve in a different way, you can align. I'm not saying you, I'm saying people in general. You can take a different lifeline and
Yeah,
maybe have different experiences in your life. It's like the fate versus the destiny. We can adjust
yeah.
the timelines that we're on. Every dream that we have is us existing right now in a different dimension of consciousness on a different timeline. So if you dream it, you can be it. It sounds so cliche, but it's so true.
No, I think it's very true, and but ultimately it goes back to what we said. It's belief. It's about having that faith and having belief, and I think it goes back to if we're stuck in the people pleasing, if we're stuck in helping others over ourselves, you're never going to be able to understand the timeline because you're stuck in someone else's frequency and you don't even know your own.
And that comes back to a worthiness wound. You're not worthy. Like when we're serving other people, we don't feel like we're worthy of being whole and complete, even though we are whole and complete. Because if
Yeah,
we're depleting our energy and because usually people who people please, um, have not had the attention as a child. So they're doing things as so they're trying to get the love and they're trying to get the attention. And every one of us have been through that. But when you start to see it through that lens, you can still give to people. But like I said, it's like you have to set that boundaries. Like, no, this is me time. I have to do things that I want to do and balance them. Even with children, it's like you have to balance that. Like I'm trying to show my children. My mom was an amazing mom, but she did everything for her kids and her family because that's that age group. And
but
so I'm raising my kids in a way that I'm like, mom has hobbies, mom has passions. I'm showing you passion because my mom looks at me now and she's like, man, I envy you. I wish I could ride a motorcycle, be, do all these
then
things. And I'm like, man, I just do it. Like, this is what I
yeah,
want to do. I do it.
I love that. But you're right. I think we mirror someone that we have known before. And I think for me, it kind of goes back to attachment theory, which is a whole nother topic, and how we were taken care of in the security as a child. But ultimately, I think that's true, and I think it's tough. Because I think we get stuck in this cycle and we just believe what we're told to believe. So Jason, what you're comment about testing, there's a couple different things out there, but realistically hit up Becky and maybe she can help you and some of that information. But human design was one. Just some of those, the Nebula app is a good app I use, the pattern. But then speak to someone who's a professional who can then, really help you understand. And I get, like though I had trauma, I had people in my life that was a village. I had people who loved me, that validated me, that showed me that life could be different. And I think, I've dated people who were, adopted. I've dated people who have had trauma from family members, and sexual trauma from partners. But ultimately, when you believe that you're not safe, if you believe that you're not whatever, it stops your intuition. And I think that's where Becky said originally, where that soul village, that soul community, that connection, that thing of community can really normalize it. And I think if you only go to people that you're used to, the abusers, the people that weren't there, you're going to keep repeating that cycle. So it's really connecting and building people that might be different from you, that are just people who validate who you really are and don't make you feel bad for it.
Yeah, because when that happens and you have those thoughts of shame and guilt, it just creates a self-fulfilling prophecy in your mind. It all comes back to self-concept. How you view yourself is how other people will view you. And when you start to view yourself in a loving and ignited way, knowing that you are perfect, whole, and complete, no matter what's happened to you in your life, and getting through those things, letting go of that trauma, you really open up the doorway for beautiful things to happen in your life because you start believing in yourself. You can't
Yeah.
create when you don't believe. Like, how
No,
are you going to create when you don't believe in yourself?
and that's absolutely true. So, as we're kind of getting to, our our end as we've, been planning this and talking, I think we said we would try to stay around an hour. One thing I wanted to, ask is, you know, what are your final words for intuition? I know we talked about belief, we talked about not understanding the community, but ultimately what you explain intuition is it's essentially it's a non-judgmental voice within ourselves that helps us believe and make assessments. And how do you build that, Becky?
So you build it. I'm just going to start with the actual definition of intuition because I have it here from my one of the courses that I used to teach. It's the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. So the reasoning is that ego trying to prove, you don't have to ask. So how you build it is by exercising it. It's by playing with it. It's by starting small, maybe using like a divination tool, like a pendulum, or doing muscle testing on yourself, or playing with, even angel cards, oracle cards. They can help you strengthen your intuition. But just really coming back to yourself and trusting yourself, putting your hands over your heart center and asking yourself a question. If you know a relationship is wrong or something's not wrong, ask yourself and feel what your heart does. Does your throat close up? Does your mind start to race? Do your shoulders close? Or do they open? Do you feel expansive? It's just working with it. It's like going to the gym. Like I said, gotta pump the iron to build the muscle.
No, I love that. I think that's a great way, and I think that physical is important. I think you mentioned how it's in your gut sometimes, it's in your solar plexus. And I used to literally clench my solar plexus. I would always be so tight. My shoulders would be up. And it was like, and now I feel it. Like my shoulders go up, I start clenching, and I just start, my breathing shuts down. And it's learning how to break that cycle, right then and there, Becky. So I think that's important. And yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard for most people because, to your point earlier, we always run back to what we think we know, the right
We
part.
go back to comfort.
Yeah, and so, Jason, like I believe in you. I hope you can find that faith. This is going to be saved. You can come back to this. There'll be links. We'll have all that information, and honestly, put some more comments after. And what we can do too is we can gladly do one of these again, and we can go over some of these topics.
Yeah, for sure. We can dig into like different parts of it and just questions anybody has who watches this now or after, put in the comments topics that you want discussed. We are a wealth of knowledge and we're connected to people that are a wealth of knowledge. So this is what this is about is like serving the collective, tuning us back into our higher knowing because we all have it. So sit with yourself today, give yourself a hug and tell yourself you can do it and
I,
make the choice. Make the choice now to make changes. That's how we evolve.
yes, I think listen to Becky because I myself. I don't always, like that self doubt is so deep. And I think, my intuition. So, like, I did human design, and that was one of the things that helped me learn my chakra points and all that stuff. And, with my sacral, which is my intuition center, is supposed to be like my authority, my decision thing. And I realized it's been blocked my whole adolescence to adult life. And it's been a process. And I think it takes time. And I think, for anyone watching, just like what I learned in leadership, be the leader that you wish you had. Sometimes you have to just be the loving person and the support that you wish you had.
And if you don't know where to start, ask yourself, ask your higher self, and the message will come to you. It will come in the weirdest way. If you're not sure, what do I need to work on within myself? Why am I feeling this way? Ask, and the message will be delivered when you least expect it.
I love that. I love that. So, anyone else, if you want, put some questions in. And but Becky, is there anything else you want to kind of go over?
No, I think this was awesome. Great, great, like, chat, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. Like, I love your perspective on things, and I love how it melds so well, and it's, like, effortless. This is beautiful. It's
This
so awesome.
honestly, like, this is our second actual conversation. This
Yeah.
like, hey, do you want to work together on something? Like this felt natural, and I think that kind of goes back to what we said, that intuition. Like I've I've met people in my life, in whether it's dating or friendships, and I'm watching 90 Day Fiance right now.
That's my favorite show. It's like my guilty pleasure.
Right? I love, oh my gosh, I love those, like, love reality shows, but it's about creating the relationship in your head opposed to the relationship you have.
That's manifestation 101.
I I didn't know that because
That is.
I didn't yeah, I was like, it's gonna be this. Here's the potential of it, and I just focus on the potential opposed to what reality was, and I didn't.
Don't do that. That's what I used to do too. You like idealize people in your head and you're like, "Oh, they have all these good qualities, but they will outshine all the red flags, but I know they can do this." And it's like,
Yeah,
"No."
and so I just am unlocking my heart chakra after some stuff, and I'm realizing the pattern. But to your point, that's where my intuition has been blocked. It's been about that. Maybe it wasn't the parental stuff, but it's a relationship stuff now, and it's about kind of finding that validation from someone else. But ultimately, to your point, even our intuition, it's about learning to listen to it, because once you do, you don't you're not going to give your power away anymore. You're not going to do the things that you used to do because you know what your worth can be. You believe in your own potential opposed to the potential of someone else.
Yeah, you start saving yourself instead of waiting for somebody else to save you because nobody's going to come save anybody. We have to save ourselves and then we can teach other people
I
how to
didn't.
unlock these gifts within themselves.
I always thought if I just keep doing good and do help for others, someone's gonna come bail my ass out. And but that's the victim mentality.
Yeah, it's waiting for somebody else, and our world's really turning that way, it's unfortunate, but the pendulum's going so far one way, it's gonna swing back really with a vengeance very, very soon. So be balanced. That's what I say to everybody, balance that. Create the ideal situation in your head and have positive conversations. Give yourself the love and acceptance that everybody desires from everybody else, and you'll start to attract those relationships, friendships into your life.
I love that. With that, Ayubowan, I'm Saul Matthew of Koos Key. May you be blessed with a long life. This is Becky Lee of Soul Alchemy and the Conscious Collective.
The collective spiritual consciousness. I always forget the name of that. That's the big group. I have a few groups, but that's the big
Yeah.
one.
Wealth of Knowledge. Please check out her. I hope we will do one of these again and we'll go over some other stuff. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank,
I love you, and I'm sending love to everybody out there.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.
How do I turn this off? Now that's the next question.
Up in the corner, I think there's an X.
Oh, there's an end.